their desire to make public comments during this meeting. As in the past, the following guidelines will apply to public comments. Interested parties will be limited to 3 minutes to provide comment, which may only be extended by the chair if time permits based on the number of proposed speakers. If an interested party is part of a larger group of persons, you're requested to identify one individual who will speak on behalf of the group if possible, and interested parties may use pseudonyms if they do not wish to identify themselves on the record. Public comment will be received in the order of registration. At the appointed time, the chair will call the names of those members of the public who registered to speak. If you no longer wish to speak, or if you are not available to speak when your name is called, the chair will move on to the next name on the list. Based on the number of individuals desiring to speak, it is evident that not everyone who wishes to speak will be able to speak given the nature and time constraints of the meeting. An email address was provided in the official notice of this meeting, which is available in the Florida Administrative Register. The email address will be open for 24 hours after conclusion of this meeting to receive written comments from anyone who was not able to address the boards today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Vasquez. Excellent summary of what's gone on over the past few months. Very much appreciated. So just to refresh your memories, we had a meeting last week. Many of you were there. Many of you were not, but many of you were there. We were part of the joint rules making committee. We had a very productive meeting last Friday here in Jacksonville. And we received lots of wonderful comment from the public as well. And we incorporated a number of changes, and we incorporated some of that comment into the drafts that we put together. So what I'd like to do today is kind of go through the draft emergency rules and the consent forms and find out and discuss amongst ourselves before we get to public comment. When we left it last week, we had a few changes that we made to our documents at that time, and staff was going to take those changes and incorporate it into those documents. And staff was also going to look through those documents with a fine-tooth comb and make whatever other changes because of some whatever change in language that they needed to make based on the comments that we had. And so what we're going to let the staff tell us some of those changes. I think that'll help us to have a more appropriate conversation. So the first thing I'd like to do is look at the emergency rule for the draft emergency rule for minors, and that draft emergency rule for minors is on Bates 67, and so I want the staff to tell us what pertinent changes we need to look at in that document.
Thank you, Dr. Ackerman. With regard to the rule relating to minors, my notes indicate that in subsection 4A, there was a deletion of a word. Prescribing, so that the language would now read physical examination of the patient conducted by the physician must be documented.
So that's based on Bates 69 for those of you that are following in the agenda viewer, the top of 69.
And the other changes would include some technical changes that had to be made to the rules related to hyperlinks. Just so everyone knows, when the consent forms actually become effective when the emergency rule is filed, they're going to be found on the websites for the boards. They're not going to be found through the Department of State hyperlink, because that's not how emergency rules work, that's my understanding. So we had to take out the hyperlinks to the Department of State website. And we also changed a title of one of the consent forms, which also had to translate over into the rule. And it's the masculinizing, actually it said testosterone treatment, I believe, originally. We changed that to masculinizing medications instead of testosterone treatment. And so we'll also revisit that. It's going to be
Page 68.
Okay, thank you.
In the emergency rule, it's page 68, but it is when we get to the consent form for that, we'll talk about that.
And that's the only changes that I'm aware of in the particular, this particular rule draft. Ms. McNulty may know of others, but those are the ones I'm aware of.
Thank you, Mr. Vasquez. Donna?
That is correct. And the department has actually obtained form numbers for each of these forms. And when the rule is published, those will be included as well as the link to the board's website. But we will not be able to obtain those links until the day we file the emergency rule, which will be next week, hopefully.
Thank you. Thank you. So before we get to the, we're going to get to the consent forms in a second, but any of the board members have any comments about the emergency rule? And if you want to speak, I'm looking at you all. You can raise your hand, or there is a function on the Teams where you can raise your hand. I don't know how that works. Let me try it. See if you can see me raise my hand. You see me raise my hand? Do it? Yeah, see that? That's pretty cool. Can I take it down? There you go. So you can raise your hand like that. So see what I just did on mine? Hit that little hand button, and there, see it comes up. So you can do that too. Either that or just raise your hand on the camera, and I'll see you like this. Yes, Greg. Well, we can't hear you. Go ahead, speak. Go ahead.
This is Dr. Williams. I missed the roll call. I wasn't able to. I am here.
Okay, and Mr.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. I've noted that. We were having some technical difficulties this afternoon with Dr. Williams, but we got it worked out, so he is present.
Mr. Romanello.
Thank you, Dr. Ackerman. Hey, so Dr. Ackerman, just from a process perspective, is it your plan to discuss the rules, take public comment, and then vote towards the end of the meeting, or how are we gonna? Yeah.
So my plan is to discuss the rules, discuss the consents, both in the children and the adults, then take public comment, and then have some more discussion if need be, and then after the discussion that we may need to have, then have a vote on the whole package or vote for them individually, whatever way we see fit.
Yep. Thank you.
You like that? That works.
And point
Yes,
of
sir.
clarification, Donna, correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is since both boards have quorum, that if there are changes or tweaks that y'all want to make in the discussion process at the beginning of the meeting, you're able to take a vote on those collectively and then vote separately at the end of the meeting on the final approval of everything.
That's correct. So that's correct, if everybody understands. So if you have a problem on Form 1, page 3, and somebody wants clarification, you can amend it that way. Everybody in the public sees what it is, you all see it, but the ultimate vote will be at the end. But agree.
Dr. Villa? Dr. Villa, you.
Yeah, Dr. Ackerman, I'm sorry, I was muting. I've read both of these rules, and I think they're good rules. I don't have any comments. I'm only just jumping in to make that comment, just in case the other board members also feel pretty good. And again, I guess you don't want a motion at this time. Is that correct?
No, I think we'll take a motion after the. It doesn't really matter. We could either take a motion now and then have a public comment and vote on it later because it's a motion on the table, or we can just do it all later.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I just so you get some feedback from the members.
Thank you.
I'm comfortable with both rules. Thank you.
Okay, well, let's move on then, since no one else has their hand raised. Let's go on the consent for minors. So the consent form for minors, consent for use of puberty blockers in minors, which is Bates number 4. So I'll open well, first we'll go to the staff to see what changes were made in that from the last meeting.
Unless I'm mistaken, I don't see any on my list for this particular document.
Okay, any comments from any of the board members? I have one comment that we'll get to you in a second. Okay, I'll let you go first, Nick. Go ahead.
Nope, I was just going to thank Dr. Mortensen and Dr. Benson for the work on the consent forms. We discussed them at great length last week and appreciate all of the hard work and the effort of the folks who put in to develop the consents, as well as the public comment last week that we used to help modify them last week.
Okay, just a couple things on that I have on here. No, not on this one. I had it on the adult one. I think I had a comment on that. Just wanted some of the things that came up from public comment before was issues like if you look on Bates number 6, there was some concerns that the psych number 3 suffering from psychiatric comorbidity that interferes with the diagnostic workup of treatment. That came there was a lot of public comment about that. I think that language is good in there. The public was concerned that any psychiatric comorbidity would put a block in their ability to be able to get the proper treatment that they need. But I think that since it says that this comorbidity must interfere, that's the judgment of the treating physician whether or not that comorbidity interferes. And number 4 has psychological and social support during treatment. That came out from the public as well. There was concerns about that, and I think that that's ambiguous enough that that shouldn't cause any disruption or any inability to get the treatment that they feel that they need. But I'm very happy with this form as the way it's been modified. So then moving on, consent for.
I have one.
Yes, Ms.
Sorry,
yes,
Dr. Ackerman. This is kind of a minor technical issue, but the first one is this meets the criteria for gender dysphoria. Would it be more appropriate to say it has met the criteria for gender dysphoria?
Yeah, so I agree with you, and I had more concerns about that in the adult one. That I was going to make that was my recommendation to change that on Bates. I think Bates 41 in the adult one. Because I think Dr. Derrick is right here, because maybe these people had been gender dysphoric, but now that they're treated, they may not have gender dysphoria. So has met means that they had it before. So is that a recommendation for change?
Yes, please.
Is there a second to that motion? I guess the motion would be to instead of saying on Bates 6, number 1, instead of meets the criteria for gender dysphoria, has met. Instead of meets.
Chairman, I certainly second that motion. This is Dr. Kirsch.
Right. All those in favor of that amendment, please say by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye. I'm not opposed. I'm sorry. Dr. Ackerman, you just
I got it. I got the thumbs up at the right time.
slow to the unmute.
Okay, good. And so I see some hands raised. Are these hands raised to speak, I guess? I hope. So Bill, was that hand raised of yours to speak, or was that a vote yes?
Neither. I was just notifying you I was going to second the.
Okay.
Second
Dr.
motion.
Hunter? Dr. Hunter, your hand is raised? I don't see
My
you.
hand is raised to speak.
Okay, yes, sir.
First of all, I agree with what you said earlier, Dr. Ackerman, your comments 5 minutes ago. I had one concern about a phrase on Bates page 4 regarding mental health providers, where it says the third paragraph down. One option available is a psychological therapy with a mental health provider that has experience in treating minors with gender dysphoria. And I think we could remove with gender dysphoria. I'm not sure the board should be mandating what type of therapist a child or parent should be going to, and any therapist can address the common comorbid mental health issues, the depression, anxiety, self-harm issues that are often present, and to confine it. There's enough trouble finding mental health therapists,
Okay,
if they
so
are, and to get a holistic mental health therapist that can look at the child in totality and not just from a gender perspective, may be beneficial. And that's up to the family ultimately as to who they want to go see.
So let me
Second that motion.
So let me ask you a question regarding that. So this is page, the first page of this consent, which is Bates 4, and that's the third paragraph. You want to take out the first sentence. You want to just put a period after provider and take out the has experience in, et cetera, et cetera. But so on Bates 6, so that first page is kind of an overview of what should be proper care. But in Bates 6, it specifically says in Bates 6, number 12, we require an annual mental health assessment by a board certified Florida licensed psychiatrist or psychologist. I just want to make sure I understand. That's a separate issue.
13, I think, item 13, I think, is what I'm addressing.
Okay. Because number 12, and correct me, counsel, if I'm wrong, but that's by statute that it has to be a board certified psychiatrist or psychologist. Is that correct?
Your statute says shall consider.
Right.
I think they're two separate things though. On the first page, it's talking about like options of not pursuing that treatment. And then on Bates 6, it's if you are undergoing that treatment, you need to have mental health assessment by board certified psychiatrist or psychologist.
Okay, so let's in the interest of time, let's move on this. So then on Bates 4, in that line with Dr. Hunter's recommendation, which was motion, which was seconded, is there any more discussion on that one page? Dr. Vila?
Yeah, I would. I would just modify the motion so that it says a mental health professional with experience in minors. I would leave the experience in minors in, and then I would only omit the 3 words with gender dysphoria. I don't know how Dr. Hunter feels about that.
Dr. Hunter?
I think that I don't have a strong feeling. I think as a pediatrician, whether a 16, 17, 15-year-old sees an adult or child therapist depends on where they're at developmentally. And I think they could be adequately cared for by an adult therapist depending on where they're at. So I'm not strong on either side.
Was the original motion to just delete at therapy with a mental health provider? Is that where you're recommending?
Yeah, I would just with a mental health provider and leave it to the family and the child and their primary care physician to determine who might be best to address the issue depending on the situation we're dealing with.
Okay,
in totality.
I'm good with that. Never mind, Dr. Ackerman.
Okay, Chris?
I just wanted to allow the record to reflect, and I believe I know the board's sentiment here, but are these changes that the board would like to carry throughout the remaining forms as well? This is the same language throughout the minor, so I just wanted to make sure that when the board's voting, they're voting to make those changes throughout all of the consent forms. Thank you.
Yep, that's how we did it last week, guys. And so unless there's strong opposition to that, we'll make whatever change goes all the way through.
That's present on the feminizing consent and the masculinizing.
I just don't want to have to discuss it again.
Yes, correct.
Pat, before we go to Donna, I see Donna's hand's raised 3 times. So Pat, anything else you could say? Your hand's still raised.
I'm going to try to take it down.
Okay, Donna.
Okay, thanks. I'm new to this hand raising thing, so I wasn't sure if it was on or off. I couldn't tell. Also,
only 2 times.
Okay. Okay, I'm not sure how to take them down, but okay. So on the previous one, we say has met, that also is in the actual rule language. So at some point, I'm assuming, is it correct? You want to change your rule language for the minors to say has met instead of meets the criteria? Is that correct as well? The actual rule language under
yeah, correct.
But for
has
B1.
met, right? That means they don't have to actively meet the
Unders-
criteria, but there's met that.
Understand.
So that needs to flow through everywhere.
Thank you.
I see another hand raised. I just can't tell where it's from. Ready for participants to speak yet. So I'm sorry, Mr. William Elijah. You can raise your hand, but we're not ready for public comment yet. Anything else on the puberty blockers? Okay, seeing that there's not, let's go on to the next form. Bates page 13, feminizing medications for patients with gender dysphoria.
All right, Dr. Ackerman, based on my notes, there was a change in the title of this form to include the word parental. Instead of informed consent, it's informed parental consent to make it consistent. There was a strike in number 8. I'm trying to remember exactly where that was, and you can help me, Danielle, if you know better than me. But it was the strike of the words gender affirming. There was a provision that was not currently in the blocks language. It was a separate paragraph standing alone that had to do with should not treatment options and caution treatment options. We moved those to the blocks so that they would have to be initialed. And that would be, and again, I don't have Bates numbers because I'm working on a hard copy, but that's going to be under the risks of estrogen section.
So that would be Bates 18. The risks begin on Bates 18.
And it's the same exact language. It's just been reformatted into the blocks.
And before it was in the overview in the beginning?
It was not in the overview, but it was in a section where it was standing alone. It wasn't initialed. It wasn't anything.
Okay.
So we moved it into the blocks.
A housekeeping item.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Vasquez?
No, that's all I have on this one.
Okay. Board members, any discussion? Dr. Kaufman?
Should it be when you have the initials, it says parent, legal guardian required for the one and then option for a section? Should it be also required for the minor?
My understanding is that the statute only requires the signature of one parent or legal guardian.
No, the question, Dr. Kaufman's question is, should we, the minor is required as well, right?
Yes.
Should we have the word required on the form where it says minor?
We can make that change on both of them if you want to.
Yeah, on all of them, we can put that there. I think it's a good idea. It just keeps it all consistent. So the statute requires only one parent. So the other parent is optional, but the statute also requires the minor sign. So I think Dr. Kaufman's point is excellent, that we should put required there as well. Is there any objection to that? If there's not, we'll just move forward with that with affirmation. Any other comments from the board members? Dr. Hunter?
Thank you, Dr. Ackerman. On Bates page 16, and I believe this is on the masculinizing form also, box 3, the treatment will not change the minor sex chromosomes. I would just ask that we remove the word chromosomes because that is just more precise language, because sex can be defined many different ways, anatomically, biologically, the type of gametes you produce, your functional role in reproduction. So just by removing chromosomes, it makes the makes the language more precise and makes clear this treatment may bring your body into alignment with your gender identity, but it will not change your sex.
Where's Dr. What's her name? Is she here? Dr. Mortensen, are you on the call?
Yes, I'm here.
What's your thoughts about that?
I mean, to say that it's not going to change your chromosomes would cover all of the chromosomes. When we're saying sex chromosomes, we're specifically discussing the XX and the XY genes.
Right, so Dr. Hunter says we don't need to even say chromosomes, just it will not change the minor sex. I think this language was originally developed by you, or in part by you and Dr. I can't think of his name, sorry.
Dr.
Benson.
Yeah, Dr. Benson. So I don't know where that language came from. So that's why I'm going to you, because you're the original, one of the authors of this.
It's more of a biology thing. When we discuss sex, it's XX from genetics, XX and XY. So just because you're going on medications that can feminize you or masculinize you, it's never going to change your genetics of you being XX or XY.
So do you agree with Dr. Hunter or not?
My experiences and with talking with and knowing patients who have transitioned, and particularly I know quite a few females who thought that they would start making, with long enough period of time on testosterone, they might start making sperm. They didn't think their chromosomes would change, but they thought they might start making sperm. So I think just saying your sex will not change covers everything. I think it encompasses any idea that your sex might change anatomically, functionally. The gametes you will produce, you won't stop producing eggs and start producing sperm, vice versa. I think the language is more precise to say will not change the minor's sex, period. But
Dr. Ackerman,
I'm not.
just as a
Mr.
point of
Vasquez.
information, there is a definition of sex in the statute.
Can you tell us the definition?
I'm looking for my copy right now. Donna may have it available before I do.
I have it if you like, Dr. Ackerman.
Go ahead, Chris.
Under 456.001 sub 8, sex means, quote, the classification of a person as either male or female based on the organization of the human body of such person for a specific reproductive role, as indicated by the person's sex chromosomes, naturally occurring sex hormones, and internal and external genitalia present at birth.
So would it be easier just to add another box, one that says chromosomes and one that says sex?
I think sex covers it all, especially based on that definition. This is Patrick.
Okay. Dr. Mortensen, do you agree with that or not?
I'm okay with that change based on what the definition is.
Dr. Hunter, want to make a motion?
I make a motion that we remove the word chromosomes in the feminizing and masculinizing forms so they're consistent and more precise.
Is there a second?
Second.
Vilas,
Kaufman.
second also.
Yeah, and a reminder, when this runs staff, this will flow through all the consent forms where that language is. All those in favor? Oh,
I have a question.
Yes, Derek.
Do you want to say sex as defined in statute for whatever it was?
I think
probably
that's
be-
more accurate.
I like
As
that.
defined by Florida
I like
statute.
that.
Sex as defined by Florida statute.
As defined by 456.001 subsection 8.
Dr. Hunter, you'll take that as a friendly amendment?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Vila.
My concern is that when you put that in there to the layperson that's reading it, that means nothing to them.
Yeah, I would stop listening. I would stop reading at that point as a parent, but
I think it's actually counterproductive. It's just important. What we're trying to say here is it's not going to change the biological sex at birth. And that's what, and so if you just leave it as the word sex, it's not going to change it. It's going to change this whole consent form goes through and explains what it does change, that one line explains what it's not going to change. And so I would be against adding Florida statute reference or whatever. I would just leave it as it's not going to change the minor's sex.
I think you're probably right, Dr. Vila, on that. Because then they have to cross-reference a separate document.
Yeah.
Other pages?
I just have a question for Dr. Hunter. So I don't see the downside to leaving the word chromosome as is written. Can you, I would leave it the way it is.
I just, as a parent, you just need to, I think the language needs to be as simple and as precise as possible. And for a lot of people, they won't know necessarily what chromosomes are, what their genes are, what their genetics are. Most people define sex by what your anatomical makeup is. So I just say sex is more precise. It covers your anatomy. It covers the gametes you produce, whether you make sperm, whether you make eggs. It covers your chromosomes. It covers every possible interpretation of anyone reading this document might think sex is.
So how about if you say sex or chromosomes?
I don't know that it's the or chromosomes is necessary because it's included, depending on however the person wants reading it, how they want to define sex, how that person defines it. As physicians, we understand sex is defined in all the ways we've been talking. For the patient reading it however they want. I just think it needs to be clear that your body may come in alignment with your identity, but your innate sex will not change, however you define it.
Why not put this treatment will not change the minor's biological sex or chromosomes?
Correct. I agreed with that.
I think that's fine. I don't feel strong. I mean, I think the idea that the statute helps define it is also, I mean,
Right.
the statute is.
But we're not referencing the statute. This is in the consent form.
No.
So I like Dr. Kaufman's language too.
Yeah, biological sex or chromosomes, I can live with that.
Okay, we'll restate that, Dr. Kaufman.
I'd like to make a motion to change the block 3 on Bates, page 816 to this treatment will not change the minor's biological sex or chromosomes.
I second that.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Thank you. And staff, make sure that flows through to all the documents that are pertinent. Dr. Pages, your hand is still raised. If you could figure that out, that'd be nice. That'd be easier for me. Anything else on this form on the feminizing hormones for minors? Okay, moving on. Masculizing hormones for minors. Bates, page 26. Mr. Vasquez, take it away.
Thank you. It's the same issues as the other document. The title was changed to include the word parental for informed parental consent. There was a strike of the words gender affirming in one section of the document. And then they should not and with caution provisions were also put into the blocks as in the other document. So that should have covered everything.
Comments from the board members on this form? Okay, good. So seeing that there aren't any, let's move on to the emergency rule for adults. Mr. Vasquez or Ms. McNulty?
Other than the technical changes that we previously discussed, I don't believe there were any changes to this document.
Okay. Any comments from the board members on this document? It's very similar to the other document.
I have a comment.
Who is that?
Um,
Yes.
So on Bates page 41, of course, we talked before about changing one to has met the criteria, but in the, it seems to me, and we discussed this, and I thought maybe we agreed upon it last Friday, but that gender dysphoria as marked and sustained might be redundant and should just be taken out. It's number
Okay.
3
Okay,
on
we're
Bates
not
page 41.
Well, we're not at that page yet. I'm just doing the rule first. We'll get there in just 1 second.
Sorry.
I'm on Bates 71. Right, Mr. Vasquez, Donna? Right, I'm on Bates 71.
Apologize.
So, and we'll go on to that. Mr. Vasquez, you can talk about right?
I'm not
Dr.
sure what
Ackerman,
you're asking me, Dr. Ackerman.
are you on
So
the rule or the form?
We
I'm
should
in the
be on the
rule.
rule.
I'm on the rule, not the form yet.
Okay,
So-
so on the rules, the same changes that, the title, making sure the titles are correct, as mentioned with the other items, and the forms we will be inserting the correct form numbers. We will be deleting the ability to obtain them, the copies of the forms from the Department of State. Just so the public is clear, when the emergency rule is filed, all the forms, adult and minors, will be able to be obtained from the board's websites, and the link will be inserted in the rule as it's filed.
Thank you. So we're just doing the emergency rule right now. Dr. Derek, we'll get to yours in just a second. I don't imagine there's much discussion on the rule because it's the same as the other one. So now let's go to the consent form for feminizing hormones for adults, which begins on Bates 38. And Dr. Derek, where are you? Bates what?
Hold on 1 second.
And we'll get to you in just 1 second. Just some of the Bates number that you were looking at. I want to get
41.
I lied.
41.
Okay, good. So that's within this. That'll be on Bates 41 for you, Dr. Derek. But before you speak, Dr. Derek, staff, feminizing hormones for adults. So feminizing medications for patients with gender dysphoria for adults, beginning with our Bates 38. Please review the changes that have been made from the last meeting.
All right, there is a strike through of gender affirming in number 8, which is on the 3rd page of my document.
Bates 41.
And the should not and with caution provisions were moved into blocks for the purposes of initialing. Which would be under risk of estrogen.
Risk of estrogen, which is on Bates 43.
And that's all I have for the feminizing.
Okay. Dr. Derek.
Yeah, it's just more of a technical correction I thought we agreed upon last Friday, but maybe we didn't. Bates page 41, of course, we will change number 1 to has met the criteria. But in light of that, it seems that number 3 is redundant, that it's marked and sustained.
I think you're correct. We did discuss that, and I don't think we had much discussion. I think people agreed with you. You all remember, Mr. Romanello, Dr. Kirsch?
Yes, I absolutely agree. I think that was, we discussed.
Right. And you recalled us removing that line?
I think I'm not sure if we voted on it, but I would like to, if we didn't, make a motion to strike number 3. I think it's more of a technical thing, but it seems redundant. I think people may be confused.
So Dr. Derek's motion is to strike number 3 on Bates page 41. Is there a second?
I'll second that, Dr. Kirsch.
Thank you. Any discussion regarding that?
Will that carry through on all documents that have the same statement?
Yep.
Yes.
Should.
Okay. Second.
Thank you, Dr. Kaufman. Although Dr. Kirsch actually seconded it, but we'll let you help him out. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Thank you all. Any other comments on consent for feminizing hormones for adults, which begins on Bates 38 and goes to Bates 49? Good. Seeing there's not, let's move on to consent for masculizing hormones for adults, beginning on Bates 50. Mr. Vasquez.
Thank you, Dr. Ackerman. There was a strike through of gender affirming in number 8 on the 3rd page. The title was changed, I believe, from testosterone treatment to masculinizing medications for consistency. And the should not and with caution provisions were moved into blocks so that they would be initialed. And that's on page, looks like page 6 of my document.
Page 6 of yours, which is, I think, Bates 655.
I believe that's everything.
Thank you, Mr. Vasquez. Any of the board members from either board have any comments or concerns regarding this document? Good, 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 good. Okay, so I think we're ready, although we'll do it in a little bit. We're ready. I think we're all pretty happy with what we have here right now. It's 150 right now. I'd like to go. Pardon me?
We need to do surgical.
Surgical,
surgery.
the surgical
Oh,
form
I'm
for
sorry.
adults.
I'm sorry. Bates 60, consent for transition surgery for adults. Mr. Vasquez.
I have nothing on this one.
Okay, any comments from the board members? Great. Okay, it's 1:51 right now. And I think it's an appropriate time to open up to public comment. Seeing as 1:50, 2 o'clock, why don't we go till about 3:20 or if public comment is truncated before that, is over before that, I'd like to give people 3 minutes apiece to speak. I'm going to start with the last name is Lancaster. First name is E Lancaster. Okay, now some of these people who in the beginning have registered, we were not completely clear whether or not they wanted to make public comment. So since E Lancaster, since they're not speaking right now, let's go to the next person, and that would be Joe Yurkaba. Okay. No, Joe. Well, I know there's someone here for sure wants to speak, and I see that she's on the call. So let's go to her. And this is Representative Anna Escamani. I know she's there. I always like to give deference to our members of elected officials. So Representative Escamani from Orlando, are you here? You're raising your hand. That's good. Maybe she's clapping. Someone's clapping. I can't turn you on, so help me, staff.
Hey.
There you are. There you are. Thank you, Representative Escamani. You're on the line?
I am here. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. And with that said, I'm sorry I missed the last 2 board medicine meetings. Have been traveling this summer for different work stuff. So I appreciate the opportunity to share my public comments here virtually. So if you're ready, I'll get started.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, awesome. So again, my name is Anavi Escamani, proud to serve District 42 in the Florida State House Representative, and of course here to issue my comment on these informed consent processes. I first just want to provide context that our LGBTQ plus patients right now in Florida are really struggling, not just with the implementation of another medical bill tomorrow, but also of course the fact that this bill went into effect upon signature has created complete chaos in the medical field for many of our constituents, not being able to have their prescriptions filled. And of course, many providers have stopped providing care because they're waiting for these forms. So I do appreciate the effort to expedite it because it really is essential right now. With that said, I'm disappointed by parts of the forms and really troubled by what some parts I see as misleading or at the very least politically motivated. In particular, the notion that gender affirming care is based upon very limited, poor quality research and is purely speculative, I just don't think that type of language is necessary, especially since we do have very well-established medical organizations that support gender-affirming care, or at least provide, important studies and reference. And so I just feel like any language that has a bias to it really shouldn't be in an informed consent form. And I do speak from experience. I worked at Planned Parenthood before I ran for office, and I put this in my comment for the earlier June meeting, that the only other medical field that I see this type of onerous, burdensome, and politically motivated restrictions is abortion care, and those are very political. It's not based on guidance of medicine, but it is just a political partisan preference. With that said, I do want to just echo, I heard some feedback about what type of mental health provider should be able to give that approval for gender affirming care. And I believe the way the law is written is that for minors, it's restricted towards those specific licensed psychiatrists, but that's not the case for adults. And whenever you set those type of restrictions, and y'all know this already, we don't have a lot of providers in Florida for any area of specialty, let alone gender affirming care. But when you set those type of restrictions, you're making it really hard for people to navigate these hoops. And I hope that's not the goal, but if it's not the goal, then you need to open it up to allow other types of providers, as statute lets you, to provide that mental health assessment. With that said, the way the forms stand now, to me, it seems pretty clear that it is designed to create new barriers rather than prioritize patient well-being. So I do urge changes to be made to not create additional barriers that are not required by statute. Statute does, of course, require informed consent, but even some of these hoops that you're creating for adults, it's just not in statute to do that. So I really encourage you to stick to what's in the book of the law, and don't go beyond that, because it's just not necessary. So thank you so much for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Representative. And thank you for your input. We'll get back and look at that regarding the mental health providers for adults when we have our discussion a little bit later on. Cora Merritt. Next I have is Luke Monaco. Okay, Luke Monaco appears to be coming on the line.
Hello. Oh, all right. I think that's working now. Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, and we have the timer going for 3 minutes. Thank you, sir.
All right, awesome. So I saw you all a few weeks ago back in public at the first meeting, and I'm honestly really impressed with a lot of what's been said here, what's been taken care of. My big concerns are relating to how we are navigating folks who are already patients and who have already gone through these processes. For example, myself, this is now year like 12 that I've been on testosterone, and also 12 years since I've had top surgery, for example. And I'm now wondering, am I going to have to go through hoops of finding a psychiatrist or a psychologist when I haven't seen someone in a very long time, because I have no mental health crisis or mental health illness at all to deal with. So that's a concern for me, is does this apply to only new patients, or is this for folks who are already patients? And I know that some of the language in there was a little bit fuzzy for me personally as an outside perspective. So I would just want to know if we're going to clarify that. The other thing that I'm concerned about, there was conversation earlier about it won't change sex, for example. I would personally, from my perspective, prefer you to just include the language that's in the bill so that folks know what you mean exactly by sex when they're reading this consent form. It also concerns me because there's a conundrum between the words saying that it will not change sex when what the wording you used previously in the forms are sex reassignment. So if it's not changing sex, why are we now calling it sex reassignment? So I would want that to be clarified. I know that you struck out gender affirming. Maybe there's another verbiage you can use instead. I wasn't really prepared to provide that comment because I wasn't sure that was going to be discussed. but that would be my concern. And then I also, I think I said enough there, but hopefully that gives you some food for thought and some things to think on. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Luke. That's excellent. Before you leave, stay on there for a second. One of the board members has her hand raised, and I don't know if she wants to ask you a question or not. Dr. Derek?
I just wanted to make a comment, just because this is the second time this has come up. I appreciate your thoughtful suggestions. If you look at the adult consent form, we moved it so that it would said that the mental health assessments would be recommended and not required. And so I want to make sure, because if we,
can you tell me the base on that?
If you look at the consent for feminizing hormones for adults, for example, which is our base 41, which is page 4 of 12 of the PDF, it separates the requirements and the recommendations. And so that was contemplated and discussed for many hours last week. And so for adults, it is not our intent to be obstructionists with continuation of care, rather give recommendations related to standard of care that we believe would be in the best interest of the patient, but it's not as written a requirement. And the other point to Representative Escamani's informed consent related to the lack of data, I think that the discussion was also that it's not required that there's only one informed consent. If there are different benefits that the prescribing physician wants to highlight on a separate informed consent, there can be, this is not the only consent form that could be given to a patient. And so different perspectives can be given by people who may have opposing viewpoints on this. So I just wanted to put that out there, because as we go through the discussion, everything's been so helpful, and last week was very helpful too from the public comment, but just so that that's out there, that's not a requirement.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Derek. Thank you, Luke. Next is Mari Rubin. Stephen Rocha, or Rocha. Stephen. Okay, almost skipped you, Stephen. Stephen Rocha, go ahead. Are you on the line? I see you're trying to get in. I saw Stephen a second ago. There we go, maybe.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, hear you fine now. I'm starting your timer. Thank you, Stephen. Welcome.
I'll keep mine brief. Good afternoon, all. My name is Stephen Rocha. I am the Policy Director for Prism Florida, a youth-led LGBTQ organization serving South Florida. The issue I would like to highlight is a portion of the language used in the patient information and informed consent section. Gender affirming care is not purely speculative, as this version of the form claims. The first gender identity clinic was opened by Johns Hopkins Hospital in 1966. People in transmedia have taken hormones for decades, and to say that only subtle improvements were seen in patients' mental health would be laughable if it weren't so dangerous. That kind of thinking is what gets critical health care ripped away from those who need it most. Gender affirming care helped me, and I'm nowhere near alone in that experience. It gives me the confidence to walk through the world as the man that I am, without fear or debilitating self-consciousness regarding the incongruence of mind and body. I demand the removal of this inflammatory, opinionated language from these forms. Medical misinformation has no place in them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for your input, and thank you for being here today and taking time out of your day to join us. Jessica Wilson. Jessica Wilson. And Stephen, if you could take your hand down, that would be good too. Jessica Wilson, seeing that I don't see Jessica Wilson, let's go to Brandy Skapalis.
Okay. Hi, my name is Brandy Skapalis, and I have, for the past 2 years, been a doctoral student in social work and have read a substantial amount of the literature. Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, here you're fine. I was saying, was thanking you for being here.
Okay. So I've read a substantial amount of the medical and mental health literature on this, and I'm going to echo what the last speaker said. The section that says medical treatment of people with gender dysphoria is based on very limited, poor quality research with only subtle improvements seen in some patients' psychological functioning. In some, but not all research studies, this practice is purely speculative, and the psychological benefits may not outweigh the substantial risks of medical treatments, and in many cases, the need for lifelong medical treatments. That is just not true. I've read thousands of pages of literature, and actually the research on this goes back further than Johns Hopkins, a lot further, to the early 20th century in Germany under Magnus Hirschfeld. Unfortunately, that research was destroyed by the Nazis as one of the earliest book burnings. But this research is 100 years old, and it is not speculative. It's over 100 years old. It's not speculative, and it's not based on limited, poor quality research. Now, I know where the state got this language from, but that source is also considered to be a biased source. It's not in the peer-reviewed literature. And so the peer-reviewed literature on this is substantial, and that it goes for both the medical and mental health literature. So I would also suggest removing that part of that section. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brandy. Next is Emily Gray. Emily Gray. Lakely Love or Lackley Love. Please forgive me if I mispronounce it. Last name Love, first name Lakey, Lakey. Yarrow Koning. Yarrow Koning, Koning, Koning. Here we go. Yarrow Koning, I see you. That's a good thing. I think we're letting you in, or are we trying to let you in? There we go. I see you now. Welcome. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, can you hear me?
Perfectly. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Members of the board, my name is Yarrow Koning. Until just this month, resident of Palm Beach County, but recently moved out of state due in part to policies being discussed at today's meeting. I've attended other Board of Medicine meetings on this topic, but this is the first I've been permitted to speak, as public comments were cut short at the other meetings I attended. I wish I didn't have to spend my Friday afternoon here listening to dehumanizing discussions about critical health care that has improved my life and the lives of so many people I love. It's disheartening to engage in a public comment process that feels mostly like political theater. But I'm here because I'm a trans educator who works with youth, and I care about the well-being of all kids, including trans youth. I've personally had trans kids tell me they can't wait to turn 18 and leave Florida to escape political climate here, including being able to access medication. I know families who are fleeing the state because they're scared for the well-being of their children. So I'm here to speak to you, to tell you things you already know, because it's always right to speak up in the face of injustice, and because trans people, kids, and adults deserve so much better than this. So here's the truth of the matter. In short, the truth you already know. The point of medicine is, or at least it should be, to help people live happier, healthier, longer, more fulfilled lives. Gender affirming care does all these things, and the barriers you continue to put in place to access it means so many people will live less happy, less healthy, shorter, and less fulfilled lives. The point of informed consent is, or at least should be, to give patients accurate information they need, not perpetuate misinformation and scare them away from procedures for someone else's political gain. The informed consent process created here includes misinformation that some other speakers have already referenced, and requirements that would make it incredibly difficult, if not impossible, for trans people to access gender-affirming care. The most ironic part of this all, though, is that limiting access to gender-affirming care will not stop kids from being trans or adults from being trans. Trans people have always existed and will always exist. Limiting access to gender-affirming care doesn't protect anyone. It simply makes life more difficult for kids and adults who already face so much transphobic violence in our day-to-day lives. I have nothing further to say today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming today and joining us. Kristen Crevelling. Kristen Crevelling. Erica Imaoka. I-M-A-O-K-A. Imaoka. Erica Imaoka. There's Erica. We'll give Erica a second.
Hi.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for the opportunity to give comments. I was at the meeting last week, so I'm glad to see that we are closer to having something to put out. I'm an advanced practice nurse here in Florida and provide gender-affirming hormone therapy to adults. So I just have a couple of comments. One is on the psychological evaluation. It isn't in that part where it's numbered, but it does still live on page, I believe it's 40, if I have the document correct. On page 40, it says, what are the requirements to receive hormone replacement therapy? In the second paragraph, it says, before beginning or continuing HRT, you must undergo a thorough psychological and social evaluation performed by a Florida licensed board certified psychiatrist or psychologist. So just a little confusing because the language is still in that space. So just wondering if it's going to be removed, can it be removed there too? So there's not any confusion about what that requirement is.
Just to respond to you, that's a little bit different. That's by statute. That has to be a board certified psychiatrist or Florida licensed psychologist to begin or continue HRT.
Okay, so then I guess my follow-up question to that is, for those who are continuing, who are already receiving HRT, what timeline then do they have to have that completed in?
Someone help me here on that.
Could I ask a question of staff while you look this up, Dr. Ackerman?
Yeah.
Staff, was it part of the statute for the minors only, or was it minors and adults?
Dr. Derek, this is Donna, if I may. It's for the minors, the statute says the board shall consider requirements in the informed consent for professional counseling by board certified psychiatrist or the licensed psychologist. So the informed consent for adults does not say that in the statute. So on page 439 or 40 that you're discussing in the adults, is that?
Right, it's page 40. It's consent for feminizing hormones for adults. It's the third page of that document, Donna.
Well, that's, I think, an important thing that Erica pointed out, and we can talk about it.
Yes.
So thank you, Erica, for pointing that out. I guess that we kind of missed that.
And Erica's not the first one. I think one of the earliest speakers, I think Representative Escamami brought up the same thing. Someone early on said the same thing about that. So I think we'll thank you, Erica. We'll talk about that when we get back to our discussion.
Okay, thank you. And then I had another one for on page 41 under number 8. It says understands the effects of hormone treatment on reproduction, and they have explored reproductive options. I guess I just want a little bit of clarification, because that is something that, I mean, as an advanced practice nurse, I know like we're not probably going to be doing this part anymore, but even when our physicians are explaining, what does explored mean? Is there a requirement to that, or is it just as long as the provider feels they have been given the information on what that looks like? Or
I think that's intentionally ambiguous, I think,
okay.
And the other boards could chime in. I don't think you'll want us to put anything more
no.
than that in there. be happy with the ambiguity.
Okay, great. I love that. And then page 67, and this isn't actually part of the consent, but it was under the draft. So I was just a little confused.
This is the consent, hang on, Erica, this is the consent for transition surgery for adults? You said page 7?
67, yeah, I think that's the page that it's on. Let me just scroll down real quick, sorry. This document it's very slow on my computer.
Yeah, that's just, 67 is just, is a draft emergency rule.
Okay, so if it doesn't live in the actual consent, then it doesn't matter. I guess I'm just wondering, so I guess where I get confused is that it says that if someone has already, consent is not required for renewal of a prescription. So does that mean if someone is already established in care with like an advanced practice nurse, now they have to be with a physician, but do they, before they can get like a refill on their prescription, do they have to be seen in person immediately, or can they get the refill so that they're not out of medication before they have that initial in-person visit established with the physician?
Counsel? My understanding is they can get renewed, but just they can't get new drugs or increasing in dosage.
And Dr. Ackerman, this is Board Counsel Chris Thierlum, and this really isn't the proper forum for the board to be opining on specific inquiries such as that. Really, the best way for those issues to be handled will be the filing through some sort of declaratory statement. Also, whenever you reference the renewal or filling of certain prescriptions, that's obviously an issue that would fall under the jurisdiction of the Board of Pharmacy. So again, I would just caution the board from providing too much guidance or particular to the filling of prescriptions, because that's an issue that, again, we would need to discuss with our counterparts at the Board of Pharmacy. Thank you.
Erica, you need to wrap up because we're over your 3 minutes. You want to make a quick statement?
Oh, no, that was all. I just wanted to clarify those things. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Dr. Derek, you had your hand raised before. Anything else you wanted to say?
No, that was helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Erica. Sarah Danker. Sarah Danker, D-A-N-K-E-R. I know Sarah Danker is on the line. I see her name. There she comes. There's Sarah, masked up in the ICU or something. We can't hear you yet. Unmute, Sarah.
Can you hear me now?
There you go. There you go.
Okay,
Yep.
great.
Thank you for joining us from the operating room, Sarah.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Sorry for the setting. My name is Sarah Danker. I'm a board certified plastic surgeon in Miami. My practice is primarily gender affirming care. To start, I'll say that when I read the surgical consent, I was quite relieved. So thank you for doing the process some justice. As somebody who's both participated in the surgical care of hundreds of gender diverse patients and somebody who's participated in research on the topic, I do take great issue with the third paragraph that has already been mentioned, that medical treatment is based on limited and poor quality data, and that improvements in psychological functioning is subtle. There are numerous prospective trials demonstrating the satisfaction and positive quality of impacts on the lives of these patients. Just this week, I saw a patient who's post-op from top surgery. This patient was so ashamed and uncomfortable with their chest prior to surgery that they couldn't pick up their niece or nephew and wasn't comfortable with their partner laying her head on their chest. 1 month out from surgery, the patient took a shower with a partner for the first time. So, tell me if you think that's not that's a subtle improvement in functioning. And from someone who's generally against this whole process, I think that if it weren't for that paragraph, that this would be a very respectable document. So that's my bit on that. So another correction I have is for the surgical consent under phalloplasty. It's important to note that not all patients who get phalloplasty have a urethra created or have their internal organs removed. So it's possible to do a phalloplasty without removing their vagina or their internal organs in a shaft-only phalloplasty. On page 3, I recommend clumping the cheek, nose, and chin and jaw surgery into facial feminization. Swelling can last for 1 year. And on page 5, the second item, I recommend changing that the treatment will not prevent saying that the treatment will not prevent psychiatric events to may not prevent psychiatric events. And also under bottom surgery, I think that the surgeon should decide the frequency of follow-up visits. I can tell you weekly visits for months after bottom surgery is neither feasible nor necessary. Lastly, I just want to state that since I'm a plastic surgeon at an academic center, I see many times more patients who have major life-threatening complications and also regret surgery after major cosmetic procedures. And so I just want to say that maybe the time would be better spent trying to protect those patients. They're the ones who are truly at risk here, and we're really doing our best to take care of our trans community. So anyway, thank you for the opportunity to talk, and I do give you all some credit for doing the process some justice, but I think there's room for improvement. So thank you.
Thank you. Are you currently operating on a patient?
I'm about to.
Thank you, doctor.
But not a gender patient. Don't worry.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you.
I mean, I just think it's highly inappropriate. All of these comments you could have sent to us. I'm an anesthesiologist, and I'd be interested in that. So I think it's inappropriate.
Well, I'm sorry you feel that way.
Thank you, Dr. Bills. Can we please cut off Dr. Danker?
Thank you.
Okay, Lydia Fine. Lydia Fine. Okay, how about Lane Alvarez? Lane Alvarez. Lane's coming on. I think I saw Lane coming a second ago.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Lane.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just took a little bit for the mic to let me unmute.
Yeah, so many people on a little bit of a delay, but thank you for being here today.
Okay, thank you. I guess I just want to reiterate a few of the points made earlier, so I'll try to be quick. A lot of the information that you have in these forms, in the beginning of the forms, as Representative Escamani and others have commented, is misleading and inaccurate. And I think that's highly inappropriate in a doctor's visit. We want to have science-based information instead of political influenced language. The other thing is that looking at the requirements that you have, it seems like a lot of this is just putting onerous additional burdens on those who are trying to seek care. Okay, for example, having the in-person visits instead of telehealth visits, having all these extra appointments for psychologists for suicide risk assessments every 3 months. I mean, I don't understand why that can't be combined with the visits with the doctor that you have every few months anyway. So it just seems like lots of extra money and time that's going to make it harder for people to get the care that they need. People have been on puberty blockers and hormones. This is not new. And yet now we're asking them to get regular DEXA scans once a year. Minors have to get hand x-rays. That's all new. And I don't understand the reason you need to have these extra appointments that can just provide blocking. So I also am concerned about where you talk about the psychological comorbidities. Specifically, are you talking about depression, anxiety, autism, ADHD, anything that can be used to prevent people who might have both those and gender dysphoria from getting care that they need? I think that's not a great idea, because sometimes gender affirming care is exactly what is needed to alleviate some of those. For example, depression, anxiety has been shown to go down with hormone therapy. So I'm not sure why we're setting up all these roadblocks, and those were my basic concerns. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lane. Thank you for being here today. Next I have is John Harris Maurer. John Harris Maurer. So Jay Kirkley pop up. Jay Kirkley, are you with John Harris Maurer, or is that your hand raised? That's your hand raised, I think. John Harris Maurer. We'll move on to the next one I have, which is Brian Schleifer. Oh, John Harris Maurer is here. I see John Harris. Are you going to speak? We'll go back to John Harris. Staff, is John Harris unable to get on, or are you not letting him in?
Yeah, Jay Kirkley's from Equality, Florida, so they might be in a group. Yeah, actually, he just popped up.
Okay, I see John Harris. So who's speaking now? Is this John Harris or is this somebody else? You said your name was Jay Kirkley. I don't see John Harris.
This is John Harris. Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, I am. And who are you? Who are you with? Are you representing a group, John?
Yes, on behalf of Equality Florida.
Oh, there, I see your face now. Oh, wow, great. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. My apologies for the technology issues, but
so tell me something before you start. Was it us or is it you? Were you? I want to know if our staff is doing it right.
I think that was on my end. My apologies.
Okay, good. Keep up the good work, Mr. Vasquez and your staff.
I appreciate the opportunity to comment. I will say Equality Florida is deeply concerned that the proposed consent forms are misleading and don't reflect the medical consensus when it comes to gender affirming care. As the American Medical Association has stated, every major medical association recognizes the vital role of gender affirming care in improving the physical health and mental well-being of transgender individuals. Studies have consistently demonstrated that providing gender affirming care that is both age appropriate and evidence-based leads to improved mental health outcomes. Yet the proposed forms require patients to sign off on a statement claiming this treatment is, quote, based on very limited poor quality research and, quote, purely speculative. This is untrue, and Equality Florida strongly believes that Floridians deserve to be informed by science, not partisan rhetoric that we're seeing in these forms. For minors, the proposal includes multiple substantive, burdensome, and potentially costly requirements. These sort of requirements should be left to the discretion of a prescribing physician based on an individualized assessment. Moreover, for adults, the proposal exceeds the rulemaking directive of the legislature, which only directed the boards to adopt forms that, quote, inform the patient of the nature and risks. Instead, the proposed form lists 8 specific requirements for you to receive and continue treatment. Imposing requirements constitutes an unauthorized standard of care. Those requirements, one of which I understand may be removed, should be converted to recommendations on the whole for a prescribing physician to consider in making, again, an individualized assessment. Our concern is that these consent forms are about creating new barriers to care and not about patient well-being. Please do revise these forms with input from proper experts with the urgency required by these state-imposed circumstances. Thank you, and we hope that you'll continue to protect transgender Floridians and ensure that they do have reasonable access to care.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. Let's go back to Brian Schleifer. Okay, Alan Grossman. Alan Grossman, are you here, Alan? Maybe Alan didn't really want to speak. Mr. Villa, Dr. Villa.
Mr. Chair, if I can make a recommendation that you announce the next 2 speakers and then introduce the one that you're on so that the follow-up speakers will have a chance to get positioned. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent suggestion. I will do that. So next is Kelly Barton. I'm sorry. Next is Catherine Campbell. But I asked Kelly Barton and Renee D to stand by. You'll be next. So Catherine Campbell. And the other two I just mentioned, you can get on, just don't speak until we're ready for you. So no Catherine Campbell. How about Kelly Barton? Oh, Renee is there. Good. We'll get to you in a second, Renee. With all your flags. I like that. No Kelly Barton. So Renee, the floor is yours. I know you're there. And while Renee gets teed up, let me call the next three names. I have Celine Adams, Kate Steinley, and Jen Cousins. So Renee D, come on. I saw you.
Hello.
There's Renee.
Can everybody hear me?
Perfectly. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Hi. Hi, everyone. My name is Minister Renee Davis. I'm a resident of Brevard County and a local activist and represent dozens of trans Floridians here in the state who I am in a thread with right now that are actively listening to this conversation. Thank you for having it be public. They're providing a lot of sort of firsthand accounts on their personal experience with this. And they're very obviously very interested in making sure these forms are helping them get access to care and not hindering it, and that they, that they have the patient's well-being interest. So at some point, I'm probably going to jump to those and read a couple of those stories. I find them very compelling and relevant to this discussion. Before I do that, I just want to echo a few different sentiments that have already been stated regarding the language on the form. Describing gender affirming care as experimental, I just want to put on record here, there's a formal report and statement that came out, I think about 2 weeks ago, from the American Medical Association, which, as you know, is a large governing body in medical science. And I just want to quickly read one of their formal statements here. And I quote, it says, due to widespread misinformation about medical care for transgender and gender diverse teens, 18 states have passed laws or instituted policies banning gender affirming care. All right, these policies do not reflect the research landscape. More than 2,000 scientific studies have examined aspects of gender affirming care since 1975. Right, and I think others have mentioned that there's also been gender affirming care, as early as the 20s and 30s, which unfortunately a lot of that information was lost by the book burnings that took place during, the Nazi regime. And it's important to note that the first treatment of HRT was actually done on cis people back in the 30s. The first HRT treatment for a cis woman occurred prior to the treatment for trans women. Same thing for trans men and cis men. So I think it's very dangerous to have this misleading rhetoric, because if I'm a trans person wanting to get care, I should know the baseline risks based on the overall governing body of research, right? Not one or two cited studies that are irregular from the body of research. So I would also encourage this board to file a motion to strike the ability of the board to cite research and reference itself. I know some of you have cited your own research to justify some of the statements you've made. If those statements are in fact true, every single valid body of scientific research should have multiple forms of evidence from multiple authors, from multiple institutions. So if you want to sit here and impose this rhetoric that gender affirming care is experimental, I would ask you provide resources that cite that outside of this board's existing knowledge, just to show, that would be a little less biased.
Thank you, Renee. Your time is up. Thank you. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for your time. Next I have is Celine Adams. I don't see Celine Adams teed up yet. Remember, after Celine Adams, I have Kate Steinley and then Jen Cousins.
I'm Celine Adams. Hi.
Okay, hang on, Celine. Hang on one second. So I just want to make sure Kate Steinley, Jen Cousins, and Simone Chris are ready to go next. So Celine Adams, please begin.
Thank you. I have nothing further to add than other people have spoken more succinctly and with more basing. So I would like to yield my time, but I would like to very much acknowledge and appreciate my fellow speakers for bringing such concise thoughts to this hearing.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being sensitive to our time today. Kate Steinle. Jen Cousins. After Jen Cousins, I'll give Jen a second to come on. We have Simone Chris. Simone Chris has spoken to us before. Andrea Montanez is after Simone Chris. Andrea Montanez after Simone Chris. Jen Cousins. Okay, Simone Chris, are you there? Simone Chris represents Southern something. She's a lawyer. Oh no. So I guess Simone Chris isn't here. So I'll ask for Andrea Montanez. And following Andrea Montanez, I have Kendra Paris and Jerica Kirkley. Okay, Andrea Montanez. Thank you. So before Andrea speaks, again, I have after Andrea, Kendra Paris, Jerica Kirkley, and then Jay Kirkley. So Andrea. Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
I just saw you last week. How many times
you see me all the, yes, good afternoon. Yeah, you see me all the time.
You follow me everywhere.
Yes, we find everywhere. Unfortunately, I hope so we don't have to do anymore. Or be casual only. But anyway, my name is Andrea Montanez. I use the pronoun she, her, ella. I represent Hot Community Center and Women Voices of South Florida. I would like to have the attention of all of you today. I really say the most medical in those things, but I want to address in all you as a bold body of the Board of Medicine. I need you to know that we exist, that we are affected by the healthcare physically, socially, and financially. And this is too confused for me and my community. This is a basic medical needs we had before because it's something we needed. You are really looking doctor look very bad in Florida. You think you are the only ones who understand what is science. You think Floridians are not intelligent. Please listen to your peers. Listen to who actually work with us in the community. Listen to the nurse practitioner. I still don't see why we don't have the nurse practitioner when they take care of me for a couple of years. And in everything, I see that. Listen to them because they know about us and what the kind of consent for, what the treatment we need. We don't need to change the name. This is basic. Stop using your medical authority to betray your profession. When serving your duty as a board, make medical decisions, not political ones, please. Show that Florida, that doctor has ethical principles. And seriously, respect the Constitution of the United States. That's the country coming for look for freedom, and I ask for that. Please listen to your peers and keep working in something that's going to help in us. Not confuse more this. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Again, good seeing you again. Thank you for your participation every week.
Thank you, Doctor.
Next is Kendra Paris. And then I have, after Kendra, I have Jerica Kirkley and Jay Kirkley. And following the Kirkleys, I assume they're related. Following the Kirkleys, I have Chris Newland. Okay, no Kendra Paris. How about the Kirkleys? Jerica or Jay or both? Oh, I see Chris Newland's getting ready. That's good to see. Kirkleys here. There we go. We have Jerica. Nice that you're here, ma'am.
I'm Dr. Jerica Kirkley, go by she, her pronouns, and I'm the co-founder and chief medical officer of Plume. I'm also a trans woman and recipient of gender affirming care myself. And at Plume,
Stop 1 second. So yep. Jen Cousins, I did see that you're here. I'm going to get to you after the Kirkleys. So just please stay on. I skipped over you. So go ahead, Dr. Kirkley.
Yes, so we take care of many trans and gender diverse folks across the country. We do it via a telehealth platform and have over hundreds of years of gender affirming care experience on our team, and grateful for the opportunity to speak at this meeting. Thank you. So I want to speak to SB 254, but also to the consent forms specifically, and just note that the law and the consent forms are in direct opposition, as noted by many folks today, to evidence-based guidelines for care and undermine long-established medical standards of care and practice protocols that we've had in place. Gender affirming care, as we know, is supported by many major healthcare organizations, just as Renee noted earlier, including the American Medical Association, American Academy of Pediatrics, the Endocrine Society. And we do have a robust body of research that continues to grow in supporting gender affirming care access, and that it is life-saving and positively impacts many people, including over 2,000 studies since 1975. But this law and the consent form set a dangerous precedent as it fundamentally creates a two-tiered health system in Florida, where trans and gender diverse individuals will not be able or will be severely restricted in their ability to access the care that they need as compared to cisgender individuals. Patients seeking gender affirming care will be segregated from the rest of the population, only be allowed to be seen by an MD or a DO rather than an NP or a PA, who we know provide a significant portion of primary care and gender affirming care in Florida and around the country. In addition, these patients will be required to be seen in person to get that consent form, which is a major barrier in care. We know that 85% of trans individuals in 2022 did not go into a physical healthcare facility when they needed to because of fear of discrimination and mistreatment. And to speak to the consent forms specifically, I do agree that I would say I would recommend removing the requirement of an evaluation or letter from a psychiatrist or psychologist, as that's not supported by the WPATH Standards of Care version 8. WPATH version 8 also notes what is recommended is a diagnosis of gender incongruence and not a diagnosis of gender dysphoria. So I'd recommend striking gender dysphoria completely and anchoring on the evidence-based guidelines that we have, which recommend gender incongruence. I would recommend removing the need for a witness signature in the consent form for adults, as this poses an unnecessary barrier. And while these might not fall within the statutes which we're discussing today, I do encourage you all to use your power and your privilege and your positions on this board to push back and not require adult patients to sign an informed consent form that is unprecedented. And really, most medical practices that we have, we don't require informed consent form to be signed. That should be something that's navigated by the physician or the clinician providing that care and the patient themselves and understanding how informed consent works best in that situation. And lastly, of course, let all clinicians provide this care that is life-saving. And we have a massive shortage in providing this care in a real life-threatening situation for many trans and gender diverse individuals, which includes nurse practitioners and physician assistants. So I really appreciate your time today and taking the diligence to work on this consent form to meet the needs of the trans and gender diverse community. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kirkley. Now, I have two Kirkleys that wanted to speak, and I assume you're both together, and that was it? Or is there a second?
No,
no, not related.
Oh, not related. Okay, so you were Jay.
Yes, sir.
And now, okay.
No, I'm Jay.
That was okay. I'm sorry. Forgive my confusion, but hopefully you understand my confusion. Okay, so now we're up to Jay. Jay Kirkley.
Yes, sir. Yes, Dr. Ackerman.
Okay, thank you. So hang on. So Jen Cousins, I know you're there, but let me get through the two Kirkleys and we'll get to you. So Jay, go ahead, sir.
Thank you so much. I want to say good afternoon to the board, to both boards. My name is Jay, and I work with Equality Florida, but I'm here of a personal capacity speaking, so not related to the organization. But I wanted to echo a lot of the comments made by previous commentators. I think they touched on a lot of things, and I'm going to talk about them again. One specifically is the initial second paragraph that's been brought up a lot, talking about how it is based on very limited, poor quality research. I think this is what other people have said, is inputting a partisan lens to what gender affirming care is. It talks about acknowledging and letting people know about both the benefits and the harms that are offered in gender affirming care, but this consent form neglects to include benefits, significant benefits. It neglects to talk about the positive things in a sufficient capacity compared to all of these negative harms that may be potentially caused by this gender affirming care. And so I think that is something the board needs to consider when writing this thing, to include more of the benefits and to show that these benefits allow patients to flourish as who they are. I would also like to remind the board about these consent forms that youth patients right now cannot start new care. But it seems to me like these consent forms were crafted in a way that is designed to make a checkpoint before they start care. So I'd like to remind the board that these are youth that are in the middle of their treatment and have been blocked by this law and are waiting for this to begin. This isn't a block to make new patients consider it. These are patients that have considered it. They have started, and now they're blocked in continuing their care. And these extra additional barriers are simply just more barriers, more time, more more things they have to do before they can even begin. And then finally, I'd just like to thank you for the work that you've done in trying to craft consent forms that appease all of our concerns, as well as doing your job. And so I thank you for that and the work that you've done. And that's it. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. Okay, Chris Newland, we're up to you, Chris. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Jen Cousins. We're going to Jen Cousins. I've been skipping over Jen Cousins for a while. So Jen Cousins, while you get yourself teed up, we have Chris Newland after Jen Cousins, and I know Chris Newland is in the queue, and Joe Mario Peterson. Joe Mario Peterson will be following that, and then William Elijah Clark. And I know I saw William Elijah Clark earlier on the line. So right now we're on, who did I say? Jen Cousins.
Hi, good afternoon, board. I have to apologize. I had another meeting pop up at the last minute, so I'm only just getting into this now. But I've been attending every single meeting that you've had since this started last year. And first of all, I want to say, we really need you to think about the lives of the people that bad practice here could destroy. I have watched friends who are adults face barriers to receiving their health care over the last month. I've watched fellow parents just absolutely break down over what they're going to do to protect their children who they feel the state wants to just destroy. I'm a big believer in hindsight is 2020, and I have to say that we all knew that this bill was going to be passed into law as it went through the legislature. There was no doubt about it. And, I would like to say that I wish y'all had watched that and started working on these forms beforehand, as soon as it passed its final floor vote, to start crafting these forms so that we didn't wind up in this situation where we had patients who could no longer access their health care. As the previous commenter said, these forms are full of all the horrible risks of what could possibly happen if you should do gender affirming healthcare, but nobody is recognizing the benefits. I have personally watched people transition and reap the benefits of gender affirming care. And I just want you to remember when you're doing all this, that these are human lives that are no different from your sons, your daughters, your spouses, your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers. These are all human people who deserve to be treated respectfully and with care. And I really want you to hold that into your hearts as you go forward with all of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for being here. I'm glad you were able to get your time to speak and come back with us. So Chris Newland, following Chris Newland is Joe Mario, William Elijah Clark, and then Ocean Price. So Chris Newland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And very quickly, I would like to thank both the boards for their work on this, and especially want to thank staff for its efforts in trying to get these forms up as quickly as possible once you approve them today, so that we can continue to and start the care that these people need. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Joe Mario Peterson, you're next. There's Joe. And while Joe's getting teed up, after Joe is William Elijah Clark, Ocean Price, and Bryce Heckmeyer.
Hello, thank you very much for taking my comment here. As y'all said, my name is Joe Mario. I'm actually a reporter from Orlando. I work over at the NPR member station, 90.7 WMFE. I've been covering this story, and I've been looking for some clarity on a part of the bill, and I was hoping y'all might be able to provide some of that clarity today. Part of the bill dictates that only physicians can be providers for care such as HRT for transgender folk. And as I'm sure most of you are aware, the majority of those who are seeking that kind of care were doing so within clinics, and nursing practitioners were the ones who were providing that care. Under SB 254, that's no longer possible. And I've been trying to find out as to why nursing practitioners are no longer why it's considered that nursing practitioners are no longer able to provide that sort of care. And I've received some very mixed answering on that. I was wondering if the board had been provided with any sort of clarity from the bill's sponsors as to why nursing practitioners no longer provide that care.
So Joe, we have this is in the form.
Dr. Ackerman, if I may, I beg your pardon. I really do not mean to be rude. I do not mean to cut you off in any way at all. But I believe it'd be important that we direct this individual to Mr. Brad Dalton. He's the department's press secretary.
Just give me a second. That's exactly
okay. Thank you. I just apologize.
Right. This is in the forum for Q&A from the press. Brad Dalton is our press liaison, whatever is the press secretary, whatever his title is. But he's one that's most has the best ability to do this. But thank you for being here, and thank you for your comments and your concerns regarding those Floridians that are of the transgender community. We'll move on to William Elijah Clark. I thought I saw William Elijah.
Hi, I'd actually like to request that I speak after 2 o'clock. Thank you.
Who's that? Who's speaking?
Like not 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. Yes, this is he.
Well,
William
Elijah, I'm going to put you at the end. If the end is after 3 o'clock, it's great. If it ends before 3 o'clock, you're SOL. So Ocean Price. Okay, I'll get back to you again. Don't worry, William, I got you. Ocean Price. Ocean Price. Bryce Hackmeyer. Bryce Hackmeyer. Oh, Ocean Price is here. Hang on. Ocean Price is coming on. So before Ocean speaks, I have 3 more after Ocean, and that would be Bryce Hackmeyer, Danielle Porculo, and Cameron Jones. So, Ocean, please speak.
Hi, this is Ocean Price. I was at the meeting last week as well, and first of all, I wanted to say that I really appreciate a lot of the changes that were made, like towards the throughout the last meeting. I feel like a lot of stuff was clarified, and a lot of things that weren't really necessary were removed. So I feel like that went in a really positive direction, and I am really happy to see that it seems like the consent forms, or at least the emergency rule versions, will be ready soon, so that hopefully I will be able to move forward with my top surgery, which, as I'd mentioned before, had been canceled because of the lack of consent forms. And I wanted to say that for moving forward, for like the final version of the form, I agree with what other speakers from the public have said. I agree that the evidence of the benefits of gender affirming care are not really speculative or limited or poor quality. I feel like the research that went into this, making this document has been very biased, and I think that should be reconsidered going forward with the final consent form. But I do feel like for now, it's really important to get a consent form out so that people can continue their care or receive their care that they already plan on receiving, to avoid further disruption of people's lives. I also think that it's important that if you're going to say that sex cannot be changed in the form, that I believe it was Luke that said that it should be defined in the form. I agree with that, because if the concern is that people will believe that it'll change their reproductive functioning, then that should be specifically included, because there are a lot of aspects of sex that are changed by by hormone replacement therapy. And I also think that moving forward, sort of going back to my first point, it's important to discuss it with doctors who specialize in this field and work with transgender patients and who have a better understanding of this, because especially at the last meeting, I felt like
Thank you, Ocean. Thank you, Ocean. The time is up. You're doing great, and we appreciate your input. Thank you so much. Bryce Hackmeyer. After Bryce Hackmeyer, I have Danielle Proculo and Cameron Jones. Is there Bryce Hackmeyer here? And staff, I just got an alert on my screen, says 5 minutes left in my meeting. Do you have to renew the license or something?
No, Dr. Ackerman, the meeting will continue.
Okay, good. That's the one that's all cut out. Danielle Perculo.
Dr. Ackerman, sorry, this is Bryce Hackmeyer.
Oh, thank you, Bryce. Thank you for being here. So after Bryce is Danielle Perculo and then Cameron Jones. And then we'll go back to William Elijah Clark. So go ahead,
Awesome.
Bryce.
Good afternoon, members of the Joint Boards of Medicine. Thank you for having us today. I'd like to start off by thanking y'all for the changes made last week during the Joint Boards Rules and Legislative Committee meeting. I am Bryce Hackmeyer. I am the Health and Technology Director at Women's Voices of Southwest Florida, and as well as the co-founder of Justice Advocacy Network. I had a few concerns, although there were many changes made to the adult forms that I appreciate. Requirements moved into recommendations. I do take issue with the third paragraph under patient information and informed consent on all forms, which is a sentiment echoed throughout this public comment with words such as poor quality research, subtle improvements seen in some patients' psychological functioning, very limited poor quality research, as well as purely speculative in practice. And I did hear a physician on this board mention earlier this meeting that other physicians can incorporate other opinions into their own consent forms. And I do not disagree with that statement at all. I guess my question would be, why is it that the boards of medicine, the joint boards of medicine, are taking this opinionated stance regarding practice throughout the state of Florida? While individual practitioners may choose to develop their informed consent forms differently, I question the necessity of such a paragraph existing in the first place in this form. Not that there needs to be something in opposition to what is currently in there, but I just question its existence in the first place. Another concern of mine, I apologize for the noise in the background, is that on the informed consent form and assent forms for minors, the extensive list of requirements still remains, and these costs rack up into the four figures, I believe, and potentially 5-figure costs annually for trans patients and their families. And I would advise that the Joint Boards of Medicine look into various costs associated with and without insurance coverage of such treatments, considering the fact that minors who have already been undergoing gender affirming care would be affected by these informed consent forms and would be subjected to these requirements. So not being able to pay for such treatments or such required testing and whatnot could render a minor detransitioned against their own will, which to me is an unforgivable situation that I believe the boards of medicine should look into preventing to the best of its ability. Thank you so much, y'all, and for giving me the opportunity to speak, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Bryce. Thank you, Bryce. Danielle Perculo. Danielle Perculo.
Mr. Chair, this is Dr. Vila. Would you mind if I made a comment?
I would love it.
Yeah, so there's this recurring theme among much of the testimony, and it's a criticism of the term poor quality studies. And I think it probably deserves just a statement to non-physicians and non-scientists what that term poor quality studies is not like an adjective. It's not like we're describing it. That is very standard medical terminology
that describes to the absence of the highest quality of studies that exist, and that's prospective, randomized, controlled studies that have large numbers of patients and follow those patients over an adequate period of time to provide good predictive value. That would be good studies. So this is just, it's a medical term, and all of us doctors are used to using it, poor quality studies. It doesn't mean that, it doesn't mean anything judging those studies. It just means that they don't meet the standard of what we in medicine refer to as high quality studies. Again, it needs to be a study that's designed and done prospectively. The patients need to be randomized, and there need to be controls. And there are no studies, and so this is just a fact. This is not, it's not a judgment. It's a fact that these studies are poor quality. They don't meet the standards for high quality studies. It's concerning me. I feel bad for the public, because I think if I did not know this about that descriptor, poor quality studies, I might feel the same way they do. So anyway, I felt like that was helpful to mention that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Bill. That's exactly right. You know, we high quality studies are randomized clinical trials, prospective, and these studies aren't that type. So we have
Dr. Ackerman.
Who's that?
This is Patrick Hunter.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to chime in with what Dr. Villa said about the low quality studies. I think there's increasing recognition worldwide and in the American press. Frankly, there's been a few newspaper articles about how the United States and the American healthcare organizations are falling out of line with Europe. To that end, we all know Finland, Sweden, Norway, England are changing their policies. Their healthcare authorities are emphasizing psychological care and greatly concerned about youth transition. 2 weeks ago, there was a worldwide conference in Helsinki, Finland, that I was aware of, where over 70 mental health providers from all over the world, from Australia to the United States and everywhere in between, attended to address the concerns about the low quality evidence. And just this morning, I took a phone call from Europe about this and had emails from Belgium, France, and Finland about these issues and why the United States is out of line with the rest of Europe. So their evidence is low quality, and I think I appreciate many of the comments. This board sincerely wants what is best for trans-identified youth with gender dysphoria, and adults. And it is not as settled as it appears to be based on what's happening in Europe and the quality of the evidence that exists in this field.
Thank you, Dr. Hunter.
Thank you.
Danielle Parculo.
Hi, yeah, I'm here. So I'm actually interested that you made that comment, Dr. Villa, especially because if this is an informed consent form, why are we using hyper-specific scientific language in it? If we're going to say it's poor quality research, why not just say it's not been peer reviewed or whatnot? There's no reason to use poor quality as a scientific term in a layman's form. It doesn't make any sense to me. I have a couple more things to go over. Also, many of the people who have made a lot of these statements are scientists with graduate degrees and know full well what poor quality means. They just object to it, again, because it's on a form for lay people. This is not going to be there's no reason. This isn't a peer-reviewed form or whatever. I have some other issues that I have with this. What are we doing about people who have ambiguous sex at birth? There's people, with Klinefelter syndrome or androgen sensitivity syndrome that might have XXY or XY and have a female phenotype. How does this law interact with them if they wish to receive cross-gender hormones? Does it matter the sex assigned at birth? Another one. Will we do this for non-sex related hormones or for treatments for low T and menopause? How far will this go? Will there be informed consent, for hormones like insulin? Insulin can kill you. It was used in the VA murders in 2017, 2018. And will these forms be required if there's an injunction? And also, this is going to make a backlog. Will you be willing to use state assets to subsidize these increased burdens? And if so, why not? Why are you putting these increased burdens on the taxpayers? And finally, I have a couple of interests with conflict of interests. Do you feel it's ethical to make rulings like this when a lot of you do not have experience with gender affirming care, particularly youth gender affirming care? And given that it's on the governor's agenda, which collectively you guys gave $700,000 to, do you feel that that is ethical?
Thank you for your comments, and we'll move on to Cameron Jones. Dr. Hunter, I see your hand raised. Is that an old hand up or is that something new?
It is down. Sorry.
That's okay. And who's this here? I can't tell who this is. Someone else has their hand raised. Oh, it's down now. Okay, no Cameron Jones. So let's go back to William Elijah Clark.
Hi, can you all hear me? My name is William Elijah Clark. I think most of the general public has answered their questions. I apologize for my delay. I work multiple jobs. Anyway, I think for the sake of time, I'm going to ask my two main questions. First and foremostly, what HIPAA compliance do y'all have planned for this form? Given that you are asking for initials, that is personal health information, and I am deeply concerned about that health privacy component. And secondarily, I also want to ask why you are asking for psychiatric evaluations for people who are continuing HRT when, particularly for those who have had oophorectomies or orchiectomies, who essentially they are waiting at this time for something, and not having gonads, as y'all should know, does create bone health issues, and the lack of this consent form is ultimately harming people from a health economics perspective. In terms of like, you are ultimately creating health issues.
Okay, thank you for your comments. And
would you be willing to answer my questions?
This forum isn't really a back and forth forum for answering questions. We'll discuss it in a few minutes. When we're done the public comment, we'll discuss amongst the board members, and the board members, some of them may choose not to bring that up, and we'll look at answering them or addressing them at that point. So that ends the list that I have of the people who pre-registered to make comments. There are some people that registered late or were beyond the deadline for putting in the request for comments. I have about 8 people. So Mr. Vasquez, if you can help me out and call up those 8 people.
Dr. Ackerman,
By the way, I only want to go till 3:20, as I said, so we have about 10 minutes left.
Dr. Ackerman?
Yes, Dr. Derek.
I saw Dr. Heller come on the line. Is he one of the people who wants to speak?
I don't know, but he had his chance to register way before this, so we'll see. I don't know. Mr. Vasquez?
the first name on the list is Lana Dunn.
That's not a real name.
The next name on the list is Michael Howler.
There's your answer, Dr. Derek. Dr. Haller? Dr. Haller, I see your hand raised. You can turn on your microphone.
Yes, can you hear me?
We hear you now, Mike.
Sorry, I was muted before. Thanks for allowing me to comment. So I would just like to state that, this Board of Medicine is grossly exceeding the scope of your authority and going much further than that's required under SB 254. what you're proposing is not an informed consent form. You're going far further and essentially trying to create a new standard of care when one already exists. Again, your inclusion of language that's not aligned with the standards of care is quite concerning. The ongoing emphasis on the idea that there's low quality evidence for gender affirming care is extremely problematic. There's far less evidence on the opposite side, but doing nothing is not ineffective. So this is a conversation that physicians have with their patients all day, every day. And so to try to put this specific language in a consent form is, again, entirely disingenuous. And you all know that, and it's shameful. The bias that's being represented by the medical organizations that you have chosen.
Please, Dr. Haller, please, Dr. Haller, I take offense to your comments. Don't tell us what we know, and don't call us shameful.
You can take offense. I'm still speaking, so.
Well, I'll cut you off. I'll cut you off if you continue to be offensive.
Okay, well, I'm not saying it to be offensive to you. If you take offense, that's your decision, but I'm just stating facts. So you continue to assert that the way Florida is treating patients is different than other countries. And no matter how many times you say it, it's just not true. There's no country in Europe that entirely bans treatment, and you're effectively trying to do that. I guess I would ask, and I know you're not going to answer this for me, but perhaps you can in your discussions, is how can you be moving forward this rulemaking process to make this consent when a federal court has said that this is an unconstitutional act? I would really be interested to understand how you feel like it's appropriate to move forward, given that's the case.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Vasquez?
Next name is Kiara Chapotin. Next name is Daniel. Is she coming on? There she is.
That's Maria. Call up the next couple so they know to get in the queue.
The next one I have is Daniel Garici. After that is Ash Buck and Show 2.
No, those aren't real names.
I'm here. It wasn't letting me go before. Can I go now?
No, yeah, just relax. We know you're there.
Okay.
So you have those other names out there. So Chiara, go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Hey, point of information. How many transgender people are on these boards? Do we have an answer?
No, we're not going to have a go back and forth.
Okay, I'm going to
discussion.
take that as 0. I believe that if you had any transgender person on your boards, that they would have spoken up and rejected much of the language used tonight, and would have pushed for rules about the language that you can use to refer to people as. For instance, transgender men were referred to as females trying to masculinize themselves. That's inappropriate. If we had a transgender person on the board, they would have been able to speak to that. They would have been able to speak to the fact that transgender people are not trying to change their hormones or to be able to produce produce sperm. We are trying to live our lives. And now, if our sex education is so poor in this country, in this state, that young people think that they can if they were born with a vagina, they can produce sperm. That's a separate issue. But I wanted to speak on a few very important things. I live in Pensacola. Florida is my life. I love this place. And one of the things I do is I organize in my community. I talk to transgender people every day, and I can tell you that there are transgender friends of mine who are dusting off their visa to Germany, to Canada, and to other places to try to get out of this state because of what is happening. Everybody on this board has been on testosterone or on estrogen for decades. You understand that because you may be in a category that maybe people on testosterone are more likely to experience such and such complications, that affects everybody, not just transgender people. What we were talking about is discriminating against us on the basis of sex. And I want to point out something to you. You have a very strong responsibility. You have to enforce the Constitution. As it was mentioned, courts across this country are ruling against these blanket bans. And just because Ron DeSantis is telling you to do something, you still have to hold to your obligation to enforce our Constitution, to enforce the laws of this country. In Florida, 1.5 million people cannot vote. So we are not able to even choose our legislatures. You have a very high responsibility. When Latino people, when our families are being, when our governor is telling us that they could ask for our papers, our civil rights have been eroded. So you have an even higher responsibility to stop the war on our health care. We are not surprised by setbacks. We are never in any way paralyzed by despair, as a great organizer said. I thought you should know that, and I really want you to.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Vasquez. Who do you have next?
Daniel Garici. Next name is Ash Buck.
Hello, can you hear me?
Next name, yeah, after that one, please. That's not a real name.
Show to Fiona Robinson and Mara Sargent are the last ones.
So any of those three can come on the line.
Can you hear me?
Okay, so this ends our public comment period. Thank you all for your input, and especially thank you those of you who gave a very thoughtful discussion and thoughtful input to us. So let's move on here. So where are we at here now? So let's go. Any more discussion amongst the board members regarding the forms? I'll start again. Now that we had some input, anyone want to discuss anything, make some changes? I'll just open it up to anybody that wants to speak regarding any of the forms that we have, the 2 emergency rules and the 6 consent forms.
Dr. Ackerman, I'm
Yes,
sorry,
sir.
Dr. Derek. I've had one correction pointed out to me during the process that I wanted to make you aware of.
Yep.
It's on the puberty suppression treatment consent form on page 6 of that document. There's
Okay,
just a
hang on.
duplication in the list.
But let's give us a chance to get there.
Okay.
So 6, that would be Bates. I think it would be Bates 9. So page 6, the puberty blockers in minors, right?
Right.
And so
on page 6, under the common side effects, weight gain is listed twice.
Okay.
That needs to be stricken.
Okay, thank you. You see that's listed as the first bullet and about 3/4 of the way down the page as a whatever that is, the 12th bullet or something.
And that will be done on any other form that exists, right? Is that agree?
Yeah, you guys will clean that up if it's on another form?
We will.
Staff? Yeah. Any other recommendations for any? Yes, Mr. Romanello.
Dr. Ackerman, I make a motion to approve the emergency rule 64B8ER regarding sex reassignment standards of practices in minors.
Okay, so stop just 1 second. So just for council, should we break out, should we have a Board of Medicine meeting now and then a Board of Osteopathic Medicine meeting?
Well, this is Donna. It's not a separate meeting. It's just that
Right.
you'll entertain the vote of the Board of Medicine when you want to, and then a separate vote of the Board of Osteopathic Medicine. It's still one meeting.
Right.
Okay,
And
so since there's no more
Do you want to
discussion,
just go back? Dr. Ackerman, do you just want to go back and forth and do?
yeah, that's what we'll do. So
And then
Mr.
we'll
Romanello, exactly, so that's what I'd like to do. So Mr. Romanello just made a motion for the Board of, for the Board of Medicine to adopt the draft emergency rule. And then what we'll do is once we vote on that, we'll let you do the same for the osteo board, and then we just go back and forth like that. Does that work? That make it quick?
Yes, however, Mr. Romanella, is your motion as amended? Remember?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a second?
Second.
Yeah, Zachariah second.
So on the for the members of the Board of Medicine, all those in favor, please say by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? The gavel is yours, Dr. Kirsch.
Dr. Ackerman, if I may,
Thank you
to the
so
board
much.
counsel. I still need to ask the CERT questions for the Board of Medicine in particular, and then Ms. McNulty will need to do the same thing for the Board of Osteo, considering how there were changes made to the rules.
Just to confirm, we're voting on the rule, not the consent, right?
Well, but that is
That
a
was-
question. Because you wouldn't do, I mean, until you do the forms, I mean, unless your motion contains the forms as well, which just be clear as to what you're voting on. At the end of the rule plus the forms, whatever that is, then you ask the CERT questions.
Right, and I was under the assumption that Mr. Romanella's motion was to approve the rule language and the consent forms as well for the minors.
Mr. Romanello?
Yeah, it's the entire rule. The rule subsumes the consent languages.
We just want to be
Okay.
clear.
Right.
Okay.
I
so
have
wait,
comments
Dr.
about
Derrick-
the adult form though, so I
Hang
don't
on.
know.
I don't think that was clear. So Dr. Derrick had some questions, I know. So there's a motion by Mr. Romanello to approve the rule with the consents that go with it, which are all those 6 consents. There's a second by Zach. And before we have a vote, let's have some discussion. Dr. Derrick, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there was a New England Journal article that came out this week related to the fact that suicidality is 7 times higher in transgendered patients compared to their age adjusted peers. I think that it's important to have psychological and social evaluation for adults. However, I do note that it was really not our intent, I don't think, to require that as part of the adult consent form. And perhaps on Bates page 40, we could remove that stipulation under what are the requirements to receive hormone replacement therapy. The second paragraph, before beginning or continuing HRT, you must undergo a thorough psychological and social evaluation performed by a Florida licensed board certified psychiatrist or a licensed psychologist. And then furthermore, the psychiatrist or psychologist must submit a letter to the prescribing physician confirming this. I think it was not part of the statute that we had to include this. I think that it would be more consistent to put that into the recommendations section.
Is there, so we'll get there. 1 second, Chris. So what she's talking about is Bates page 40. It's under the requirements, the second paragraph beyond requirements. Dr. Derrick is making a motion, I think, to strike that and put that language into the into the first page or in the overview, into the recommendations. Before I get to Dr. Villa, Mr. Durlam.
Yeah, so, and I beg your pardon, but considering how the way the rule language is split up, there are actually 2 emergency rules. There's an emergency rule for the minors adopting the 3 minor consent forms, and then an emergency rule for the adults adopting the 3 adult consent forms. So I believe Mr. Romanello's motion was specific to the minor rule and the minor consent forms. And I believe Dr. Derrick's comments might be better addressed at the next consent form once we move on to the adults.
Okay, Dr. Villa.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think Mr. Romanello did state minors first, and so I think the vote that we just took, or I would move that we retake that vote with the clarification that it is the minors rule and the minors consent forms together.
And they want to deal with the adult
Later.
Okay.
Let's deal with the adults after.
Okay. So any more comments regarding the minor rule and the minor consent? All those in favor, please say by saying aye.
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 All those opposed?
Aye.
Okay, now do I give it to Dr. Kirsch?
Unfortunately, Dr. Ackerman, I do need to ask the CERT questions for the minor rules before we move forward. I apologize, but the first question is, will the proposed rule amendments, again regarding the minors only, have an adverse impact on small business?
Romanello moved no.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Is the proposed rule amendment likely to directly or indirectly increase regulatory costs to any entity, including the government, in the aggregate of $200,000 within 1 year after implementation?
Romanello moved no.
Vila second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Will this rule amendment create an offense that would constitute a minor violation under the rule?
Romanello move no.
Vila second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And then the final issue for consideration is whether or not a sunset provision should be included. And I would point out to the board that this rule is required by statute, so a sunset provision is not necessary.
Romanello move no.
Vila second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Dr. Kirsch.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ackerman. So for the Board of Osteopathic Medicine, I would like to make a suggestion of a motion to adopt both the emergency rule as well as the consent form for the minors. Do I hear a motion? Is you going to make the motion?
Oh, no, okay,
So
I'll
moved.
make a motion.
So moved.
Williams make.
And I second. What?
Okay, excellent. Who seconded that?
Dr. Ducatel seconded.
Excellent, great. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 Are there any opposed? So the osteopathic board did pass that rule for
I
minors.
oppose.
To go through.
Dr. Kirsch?
This is Valerie Jackson.
I am so sorry. So there is one opposition. And Donna, are you going to take us through the request?
Yes. Will the proposed rule amendments have an adverse impact on small business or likely to directly or indirectly increase regulatory costs to any entity in excess of $200,000 in the aggregate in Florida within 1 year after implementation of the rule?
Williams move
So-
no.
Okay, is there a second?
Mortensen second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Hearing none. Donna?
Thank you. Should a violation of this rule or any part of this rule be designated a minor violation?
Williams no.
Mortensen second.
Okay, is there a second to it? And all in favor?
Aye.
Saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? If there is none, motion passes. Donna?
Thank you. And do you want to add a sunset provision to this rule? Again, it's required by statute.
We have a motion on the floor.
I move no.
No. Okay, second.
Mortensen second.
Martin, second. All agreement to the motion, please by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, Dr. Ackerman, I return it back to you for discussion of the adults. We'll do the same thing.
Thank you. So I'd like to entertain a motion now to accept the draft emergency rule, which is for adults with the consent forms that go with it.
So Romanello so moved.
Is there a second?
Zachariah second.
Okay, discussion. Dr. Derek? I think this is-
Sorry to put this in the wrong spot. Yeah, I moved to strike the second paragraph on Bates page 40 related to the mandatory psychological testing by a psychiatrist or psychologist in the adult consent form, and rather, include that in the recommendation portion, which I think it actually is already there.
Is there a second to that?
I will second that, Dr. Kirsch.
I was going to second it.
Okay.
It's Dr. Kaufman.
Any discussion about that? Dr. Villa?
This is Vila. I'm opposed to that. If you remember the testimony that we heard, there were a number of former trans patients who testified about the problems they were having, and the lack of clarity that they had in their lives, and the fact that they had emotional problems. And I think it would be a standard of care in the state that if you're undergoing these what are potentially irreversible treatments, and this is not a large burden, right? These are treatments that we've heard significant testimony have caused permanent harm to patients. And I just think it's within the standard of care to make sure that kind of care is ongoing. So I'm going to speak, and I'll be voting against this if it goes in that direction.
One comment. I mean, we could consider striking or continuing hormone replacement. Rather have it just before beginning hormone replacement therapy, you must undergo a psychological evaluation. To me, it seems like if someone's steady state for 12 years on these therapies, in order for them to continue to get the medications that requires them to get this sort of appointment, you know, I think it's good medicine to do that. I'm just not sure it should be a requirement.
Yeah, Dr. Derek, but you know how it is when you have an ongoing relationship with a physician. Getting that appointment and getting through that appointment is not a big burden. It's not a big hurdle. So, and some of these patients had been under treatment for 5 or 6 years, and then at that point realized it was the wrong thing for their lives, and at that point it was too late. So I'm not sure how you put a time on it. And I don't think just the initial treatment is the right time. I think there's a benefit to ongoing treatment. And so
I don't disagree with you. I 100%, we're 100% in agreement. I just don't believe it should be in this informed consent. So I would, instead of removing just continuing, I still push through my original motion to remove the entire paragraph.
Any other comments?
This is Dr. Hunter. I agree with your concerns, Dr. Derek, but I also agree with Dr. Villa. Historically, youth transition began when the Dutch looked at their adult long-term data back in the mid-90s. And the long-term data was that adults were not doing well after transition. Hence, they proposed transitioning youth. And the long-term Swedish data is that adults do not do well. And we're starting to get data that the mental health problems remain. In the Chen study for youth, 2 of the kids committed suicide. The 315 that were being transitioned in the NIH study. So the mental health benefits are doubtful. And Dr. Derek mentioned the recent NEJM article that showed mental health benefits for adults are not as robust as we would hope they would be. So I'm not for mandating that. I mean, I think mental health needs to be part of this care. How do we make that happen, or how do we encourage that happen? I don't know, but to recognize as a profession that the hormonal and surgical transition may not address all the issues, others have recognized it. We've recognized it for decades and decades. So I don't know why forward.
This is Dr. Kirsch, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Just as Dr. Derek, all we're doing is putting it under the recommendations, not mandating it. Is that not correct? Is that your recommendation?
That's my recommendation, is to make it a recommendation and not a mandate.
That's right. So it's not a mandate, and it doesn't prohibit somebody from getting their medications or access to care. I think that's something that's very important for us to deal with.
So Dr. Kirsch, you're speaking in favor of Dr. Derek's amendment, right?
Absolutely correct.
Donna?
Thank you.
Donna?
Thank you. I just want to remind that the standard of care is the standard of care. Whatever that is, that all physicians need to comply with that, whether it's in the informed consent or not. And so to put it under the recommendation doesn't mean that whatever the standard of care for whatever procedures, all physicians are required to comply with that. And as we all know, they evolve over the years too. So I just want to put that out there.
So are you suggesting it be a recommendation or stay in requirements?
Recommendation.
Okay. Chris, you had your hand up?
Yes, sir. And to that point, exactly echoing Ms. McNulty's sentiments, I didn't know if the board wanted to consider just changing the must to a should. Before beginning or continuing HRT, you should undergo a thorough psychological evaluation. Just, again, something to consider. But the language as it currently states, it does state on, Bates page 40, before beginning or continuing HRT, you must undergo a thorough yada, yada, yada.
I think that that sounds good, but it does kind of go against the header, which is what are the requirements.
Yes.
So it's a little bit confusing.
I think it would be confusing.
So if you put it under recommendations, Dr. Derek, you would want to change the word from must to should, I assume, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So you're saying to move it, this is Hunter, move it to Bates, or I'm looking at the page number 4, the following may also be recommended by your prescribing physician, and say should.
Right.
Yeah. Should.
Well, it is there on page 41, on that page 4, Dr. Hunter, on bullet number 6.
Well, then maybe it's that we recommend that they have counseling with a psychologist or psychiatrist.
Well, it's there as a recommendation in bullet number 5, the board certified psychiatrist.
Oh yeah, then it's there, so it's redundant. Then you're right.
6 says similar.
6 is a social worker or whatever, but 5 is the licensed psychiatrist, psychologist. So it's there. So you could just strike that and you still have it in the recommendations, Dr. Derek, I think.
Right. So strike it on page 40 and it's there already on 41.
Mr. Chair, may I point out this statement is in the corresponding consent form. So I just want to clarify if you guys want to carry that change through, if that's the proposal.
Which corresponding consent form?
It's
Masculizing, you mean?
Yes, it's on both of those. So I just want to make sure if you guys are.
All 3 of the adult forms. Feminizing, masculizing is also in the transition surgery?
It is not in the surgery, just the feminizing and masculizing.
Right. So Dr. Derek, was your intent to make your motion to delete from both of those, correct?
Yes. Yes, it is.
And Dr. Kirsch, you second that, I'm sure you're still with her.
Yeah, yes.
So any more discussion on this? Dr. Villa?
Yeah, just another quick comment. Look, I'm aware of patients that are undergoing these therapies without any kind of psychological treatment. And I think a recommendation is just not adequate. I would be open to doing it every 2 years. I would be open to changing it to upon initiation of therapy and every 2 years after. If you all want to meet in the middle someplace, but everything that we know of, all of the studies say that there's concurrency and a high degree of comorbidity, and to like make it just a recommendation is just not adequate. I just think we're falling below what we should do. We've got to protect these patients, and it's a substantial comorbidity. And requiring follow-up is just not, it's not a high hurdle considering the potential benefits. So again, I urge the board members to, if you want to vote this down, and then I will come back and revise the language upon initiation and every 2 years after, or 2 years or 3 years after, however you all want to do it. But to allow these patients to go in and they're going, I know of an individual that's going in and not receiving any psychological counseling or therapy at all. And this is a big change in their lives. So I hope board members, we get a chance to find a middle ground here.
Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, I want to call the question.
Okay. So the motion was from, I guess we're just going to vote on the amendment, or am I voting on let's just vote on the amendment, then we'll vote on the initial motion. The amendment is to delete that second paragraph on page 40, the second paragraph under what are the requirements to receive human replacement therapy, and that's the paragraph regarding the psychological social evaluation. It's been made by Dr. Derek, seconded by Dr. Kirsch. All those in favor of that amendment to Mr. Romanello's motion, please signify by saying aye.
Wait, Dr. Ackerman, I have a point of order question.
Yes, sir.
Aye.
This is
Well, hang on. Mr. Vasquez wants to speak.
This is the Board of Medicine's motion. Dr. Kirsch can't second it.
Wait, Paul, this is just for this particular thing. It's not for the whole rule.
So we're going back to joint meeting? status?
We're joint, we all have joint meeting, but they're
Okay.
just talking about this one paragraph.
Great.
Correct.
Perfect. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure we weren't getting screwed up procedurally.
Thank you. Thank you. So all those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed?
Aye.
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 Aye. Well, let's do a roll call. So, because it's too confusing on this. So all those in favor, if Danielle or Paul can keep track here. All those in favor of the motion, I think I have Derek in favor of it. Romanello in favor of it. Who else is in favor? Who's that? Who's that?
Maria, Miss Garcia.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Garcia. I don't see your picture, so if you're not on video, it's hard to see you. So there's 3 people in favor. Who else? I have Garcia, Derek, and Romanello. And Kirsch, how about you?
Dr. Kirsch, and then in our board, why don't you say for or against your name?
Wait, who's in favor of it is Derek, Romanello, Garcia. Kirsch, are you in favor or not?
Yes, I'm seconded.
Right, well, I know if you have to vote, you can second it, but you can vote against it.
Yes,
So-
no, in favor of.
Okay, so that's 4 in favor. Anybody else in favor besides those 4?
Diane. Valerie Jackson.
Jackson's in favor. Greg?
Opposed?
Wait, I want in favors first.
Okay, I thought you said correct.
Dr. Morton's in favor.
Okay,
Mr. Chair, Williams?
what do you say?
Oh, Williams was in favor.
Williams is in favor? Okay, thank you, I couldn't hear you well. Okay, you got that, Danielle and Paul? Okay, all those opposed, I think we have Villa opposed. I think I heard that,
Dr. Kaufman opposed.
Hoffman's opposed. Zach, how about you?
Yes, opposed.
Opposed?
Pages.
Page is opposed.
Hunter's
Hunter,
opposed.
Ducatel, where do you stand?
Opposed.
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 Ackerman's opposed. Where you at? Did I miss anybody? Paul, Danielle?
I have 7 and 7 right now.
That's what I have.
How about
That's a
Chris Cregan?
procedural question.
Did we get Chris Cregan's vote?
Mr. Cregan,
We
we can't hear you.
You're on mute.
Cregan, we can't hear you. Just, are you, if you're in favor, put your thumb up. If you're opposed, put your thumb down.
And it needs to be audible.
Yeah.
Needs to be audible. Well, I understand sign language, Donna. That's sign language.
It's for the record.
Chris, we can't hear you.
Okay, so the interest of, listen, I'll tell you what. I will draw my vote as abstained.
Yeah, you don't get to abstain.
No, that won't work. That won't work. Never mind.
Yeah, can't do that.
The wrong way. Okay, I'm trying to help him out.
Dr. Derek, how would you be opposed to the language upon initiation and every 2 years after?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
I think looking like if the other speaker could speak, it would be voted down. So I think as a compromise, as you mentioned before, before beginning.
Didn't know if you'd be in favor of it, and then we could just resolve.
I would be in favor of that amended language as an alternative to not having it mandated as written.
Can you say that one more time for me, please?
So, Mr. Chair, I don't want to take over the meeting. Is the floor open for an alternative?
Please.
Okay.
So, Dr. Derek, will you please withdraw your motion?
The other motion? Yeah.
Okay, so
Okay.
Dr. Villa, please make a motion.
I make a motion that language that we're discussing be modified to that it's required that a psychiatric evaluation is required upon initiation of treatment and every 2 years thereafter.
Is there a second? Well, hang on, Dr. Kirsch. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Zach. Discussion, Dr. Kirsch. Or, let's go to Kirsch and then Derek. And
No, I'll
Craig,
defer to Dr. Derek, because I don't think that was the intent of the original motion. The intent of the original motion was to recommend the mental health counseling treatment on an ongoing basis, but not mandating it for the beginning of treatment. Plus, this is an adult, and they've already been in treatment. So we're now going to ask them to start doing psychiatric treatment initially before they get their medications. That doesn't make any sense.
I think that's a good point, and I think the clarification, and Dr. Vila, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's before beginning the treatment at all. For the first time that you're getting the treatment, that would be the requirement. And then every 2 years after that. And then how would you contemplate, just because it's going to be a gray area, for people who are currently on it, does that require them to get then psychiatric treatment within 2 years from the order being, or the rule being finalized?
I would say the rule says what it says, and the rule would say upon initiation of treatment. So if they're already on treatment, it would be every 2 years. So the person that's on treatment could wait 2 years from the beginning of this rule before that they had to get reevaluated. Okay.
and so the motion is to change the language so that saying that requires psychological and psychiatric evaluation at the beginning of treatment and then every 2 years thereafter. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
There we go. Good. Okay. Any other changes, any other discussions for any change to any of those consent forms? Seeing that there's not, now we'll go back.
Never mind. No, that's okay.
So seeing there's not, we'll go back to Mr. Romanello's original motion, which is now just for the Board of Medicine, right, Paul? Just for the Board of Medicine to vote
Correct.
on. And that is to vote on the amended draft rule and consent forms for adults. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, Mr. Dillon, sir.
Will the proposed rule amendments have an adverse impact on small business or be likely to directly or indirectly increase regulatory costs to any entity, including the government, in excess of $200,000 in the aggregate within 1 year of implementation?
Romanello move no.
Vila second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chris?
Will this rule amendment create an offense that would constitute a minor violation under the rule?
Romanello move no.
Vila second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chris?
Does the board want to impose a sunset provision for this rule or amendment? Again, reiterating the fact that the rule is required by statute.
Romanello move no.
Vila second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Dr. Kirsch?
Thank you, Dr. Ackerman. So for the Board of Osteopathic Medicine, our job is to vote on the amended rule as well as the consent forms as we've agreed to so far. And I offer a request for a
Motion.
motion. Thank you. Jeez.
Mr.
A
Chairman,
motion to move forward. Yes, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the proposed rule as amended.
Second, Williams.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Thank you, Dr. Dupatel. So all in favor of the motion, please signifying by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, the motion passed. Donna, do you want to go through the requirements of the state?
Thank you, Dr. Kirsch. Will the proposed rule amendments, will proposed rule have any adverse impact on small business or likely to directly or indirectly increase regulatory costs to any entity in excess of $200,000 in the aggregate in Florida within 1 year after implementation?
Ms. Ducatel, I move no.
Mortensen, second.
Thank you, Dr. Morrison. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
Should a violation of this rule or any part of this rule be designated as a minor violation?
Williams would move no.
Mortensen, second.
Thank you. All in favor of the motion, please by signifying by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes.
And do you want to add a sunset provision to this rule with the reminder that it's required by statute?
Duke move no.
Okay, and we have a second? After Williams' second. Can I, all in favor of the motion, please by signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and all opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you so much, Don.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. Thank you, Dr. Kirsch. So is there any other discussion for the greater good of the joint boards of medicine and osteopathic medicine? Seeing that there's Donna.
There's Donna.
Okay.
There's Donna.
Just it'll be quick. Just a reminder that the emergency rules that you have voted on are, I hope is get them filed as soon as possible next week. And a reminder that to the public that those will be posted on the board's website so they can access them as soon as possible.
Thank you, Donna. Again, I want to thank you all for taking time out of your busy afternoons today. I want to thank all the speakers, all the members of the public that were here today for the thoughtful comments and input. And I call this meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.